All right, now listen here. You need to really be careful about this investment stuff. It's all really, really risky and you could lose everything. I mean, I know a few people who invested in real estate, they lost everything. And avoid the stock market. It's nothing but a scam. It's nothing but a pyramid scheme designed for the rich and the few people who profit off of every single other person. So my advice would be just take your cash, try to save some money, put it under your mattress, put it under your pillow, and just save it for a rainy day. Listen, I'm just kidding. That's not the advice I actually have for you. You see, a lot of us have heard some pretty crappy advice over the years in terms of finances and building wealth. Now, most of the time, most of us pretty much know when that information is pretty crappy. However, there are some times, and there's a lot of common information or advice out there that sounds pretty good on the surface, and it makes a lot of sense, but that actually could be the thing that could be keeping you broke or keeping you from building wealth. So what I want to talk about is what are those things that really sound decent, but are preventing you from maximizing your wealth and maximizing your financial freedom. All right, hey, what's up, everybody? If you're new to this channel, my name is Sean. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you check out some of my other videos. If you're all about personal finance, entrepreneurship, creating life on your terms, living an extraordinary quality of life, you may actually really like this channel, so be sure to check out some of my other videos after watching this. If this is not your first time, welcome back. Thank you so much for your support. But I am excited for today's video. Let's talk about some of the worst financial advice that I have heard that is pretty common that could be holding you back financially. So the very first one is carrying a balance on your credit card to keep your credit score high. I cannot tell you how many times I see this floating around on the internet, other people sharing this advice to other people. I've even had and heard some financial experts talk about how you should carry a credit card balance to keep your credit score high. Listen, I've posted videos on this before, and I'll leave some links in the description box below, but you do not need to carry any balance whatsoever on your credit cards to maintain a high credit score. In fact, the lower of a balance that you carry, the better because of utilization rate. You see, my advice for this is simply pay your credit card off every single month. You can have an amazing credit score carrying zero balances on your credit cards. And in fact, it's going to help you financially when you carry zero balance, because if you have balances that linger every single month, you have to pay interest on that amount. And when you pay interest on it, that's money that's going to the banks and not in your pocket, working for you and building wealth. So speaking of credit cards, the second piece of advice is avoid credit cards at all costs. Listen, this is something that's gotten very popularized by financial gurus such as Dave Ramsey, who suggests and advises that you should not have any credit cards and you should just never get them, that you don't need them. While I can understand, why he may advise that, because some people do have a spending problem and credit cards get them into a lot of trouble, credit cards really are one of the best ways to begin building up your credit score and being able to use that credit score to leverage and build wealth for yourself. If you ever want to buy a home in the future, you want to start creating rental properties and getting loans, you're going to need a good credit score. And typically credit cards are one of the best ways of building that up. So I would not advise avoiding credit cards. In fact, I would say get one as early as you can, but make sure that you create strong spending habits and you do not spend money that you would not otherwise. So this brings me to point number 3, that the actual mortgage, the maximum mortgage that you are approved for from your lender, is the actual mortgage that you can afford. This is not the case. Here's what you have to remember. Your bank or your mortgage lender, their goal is to create a profit. And the way they do that in terms of your home mortgage is that they want to try to give you the maximum loan possible while making sure that you have a somewhat decent chance of paying the loan back and not defaulting. So they usually use what's called the 28-36 rule. Now, I'm not going to go into massive detail, but essentially it means this, that your home should be no more than 28% of your gross income. And in addition to it, your total monthly debt payment, so including your mortgage, student loans, car payment, all that stuff, it should be no more than 36% of your total monthly income. So between those two things, they usually come up with a number and they usually try to get the maximum number possible. But just because they give you that does not mean you can afford it. You got to remember, they're not trying to consider whether or not that you're actually saving for retirement, or that you're paying down other debts, or that you're doing things that are financially advantageous to building wealth. They are trying to make a profit. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you are spending a very, very appropriate amount. As a general rule of thumb, that your housing should be somewhere around 25% of your income and no more than, but it really depends on your situation and what's going on. The fourth rule is that you should buy the largest home possible to maximize tax benefit. I've heard this quite a few times from so many financial advisors, and also just other people online and on the street, where they say, hey, like, make sure you buy the biggest house because that's gonna give you the maximum amount of tax write-offs. That is technically true in the fact that the larger the home, the greater your home mortgage, the more taxes you're going to pay, and those taxes do create greater tax write-offs. However, just because you get more tax write-off does not mean that you should actually be spending more money to have more tax write-off. Remember, at the end of the day, it's better to have not spent money at all than to have spent money to get a small percentage of that back in form of a tax write-off. So my suggestion is, when it comes to your home, pick an amount that's very comfortable for you, and then based off that amount, figure out how to maximize your tax benefit. But don't spend extra money to then try to get more tax write-off. Remember, you don't get every dollar that you write off, you get a percentage back. Number 5, you need a 6-month emergency fund. Now, this one's kind of a tricky one because this actually is pretty solid advice for most people. But the reason I have this on here is because it's really different for different people. And for some people, you don't really need a 6-month emergency fund. You can get by with just a couple months. So the idea is this: you want to have an emergency fund because, let's face it, you may face a job loss. You may have, a refrigerator go out, or your car go out, or something, and you need to have some money behind you so that you're not racking on credit card debt in order to keep afloat during financial downturns. But this really needs to be based on your specific financial situation. There really is no hard rule, you have to have 6 months. My advice would be to pick an amount that you are most comfortable with. If you have a job that's going to be a hard time to replace, and it's going to take a while to replace it, you may want upwards of 6 months. But, if you're okay with, if you do lose your job working like freelance gigs or doing things on the side to make some extra money, keep yourself afloat, you may not need 6 months. I typically only keep a couple months emergency fund in my account. I like to have very little cash in my bank because that money's not working for me. The general idea with this is that you don't have to have a 6 month. It could be anywhere from, 1 to 3 months up to 6 months, maybe even a year if you have a high monthly expenses and you have a specific job that's going to be really hard to replace. So in general, just find something that's comfortable for you that seems realistic for your situation. Number 6, only invest in what you know. This is another common trap. So of course, as an investor, you need to be knowledgeable in your investments. You should not be just investing blindly in different things because you heard from someone else that it's a good investment. That's the worst way to invest. You have to have knowledge. But the reason why I put that you should only invest in what you know is because of this. Typically, when they say you should invest in what you know, is because you should have a decent amount of knowledge in a particular industry. However, here's the downfall. We simply cannot know every single thing about every single company. So let's take stocks, for instance, and let's say you want to invest in a couple different companies. Let's say you want to invest in Apple, but at the same time you want to invest in, let's say, Verizon, but then at the same time you want to invest in some, manufacturing company. It would be really, really challenging to have 20, 30 different stocks where you have an insane amount of knowledge about understanding, the company, the trends that are happening within that marketplace, understanding, financial P&L statements for every company. You're not going to know every little detail about every company. So while you should have a general knowledge about everything, in essence, you really, at the end of it, should have a very diversified portfolio so that you mitigate risk and you can maximize potential earnings. But by doing that is that you're probably not going to have a strong financial knowledge. So if you've watched a lot of my videos before, you know that I'm a pretty big advocate of just matching the index and things like an S&P 500. You're not going to know that much information about the 500 companies that you invest in. But what you do know is that statistically, that you are more than likely going to beat most people who invest in individual stocks over the course of a 10-year plus basis. Number 7, Renting is simply throwing away your money, and you should always buy a house as fast as possible. That's actually another one that's a very, very common trap and a myth. Listen, renting is not always a bad thing, and the answer is not always to buy a home. Once again, this is very, very situational. Yes, on one hand, that you can say that renting money is throwing your money away. And here's I'll say, well, yeah, but you're making someone else rich and you're not getting the money back and you're just throwing it away. Like, yes, in some regard, you could say that is true. But what most people fail to realize is that even when you own a home, there's a lot of payments that are simply wasted payments that you don't get back either, like property taxes, home insurance, different fees, HOAs if you have one. These are other costs and associations and fees that you have that you do not get back. Once again, you are also just throwing away money and not getting it back. So we have to stop looking at renting as just throwing away money. There can be a lot of advantages to renting. It's more flexible. You may be able to take some of the down payment, that large down payment you'd have on a home, and invest it in something that gives you a high return and gives you income. There are different things you can do. So general rule of thumb is that it's not always a bad idea to rent. In some cases, it's very advantageous. I live in Los Angeles, and in some areas like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, in very high cost of living places, sometimes you actually get more money by renting and investing elsewhere in somewhere like the Midwest or the South. Now, there are some really great calculators out there. I'll put a link in the description box below to one that actually allows you to compare the cost of renting versus owning, and it will show you when it's actually a more advantageous time to buy versus rent. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say if you plan on staying somewhere at least a minimum of 5 to 7 years, and that the mortgage payment is around maybe 25% less than the actual rent of renting the place elsewhere, then you may want to consider actually purchasing that property. But this is a common myth and a rule or a piece of advice that is not always 100% accurate. Now, the final one is that college is always worth the investment. Now, this is not here to bash on education. In no way do I say that getting an education is a bad thing. There are many, many advantages. And in fact, a lot of studies and statistics show that people who earn college degrees make more money over time than non-college degrees. However, college has to be looked at as an investment, just like anything else, just like if you're buying a rental property. What you need to do is you need to assess, what school am I going to? How much debt am I going to accrue while being there? And how much money am I likely to make once I get out of school? And what will be my debt payoff plan? What happens with a lot of people is that they go to the fanciest school that they can, and they get an insane amount of debt that they accrue during college. And they end up just getting a standard run-of-the-mill job. Nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that their income to debt ratio now is way out of whack. And this is why we have such massive student loan issues. So college is not always the answer. In fact, there are a lot of amazing jobs that pay upwards of 6 figures or more that don't even require a college degree. So college is not always worth it. Depends on the situation. There are some people who just aren't meant to go to school. They actually are better off just learning a skill or going to a trade school and getting a lucrative skill or a trade and then just focusing on that. Now, other people who want to go off to college, it's fantastic and it's a great idea. If it's something that you're passionate about, something you want to do, then you should do it. But if you do it, you need to make sure that you are assessing how much it's going to cost you and how long it's going to take you to pay off those loans. Anyways, that's all I have for today. If you liked this video, make sure you smash that like button if you haven't already. Also, do me a solid and hit the subscribe button as well. It would mean the world to me. And be sure to share this video with someone that someone that you think could be, this could be useful information for. But let's get out there and let's crush it.